Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of the 18th of May, and we are recording it on the 13th. And I'm bringing on someone who is no stranger to the show. He's been on a few times over the years. The one and only John de Graaf. He's up there in the Northwest. He's a documentary filmmaker. I first became aware of John when he wrote a piece on the Wandervogel, which are kind of like German hippies who went back to the land and ended up supporting Hitler. And he wrote that, I think, for the Coevolution Quarterly, something we read back when it was produced. And we've had him on more recently when he talked about his film, The Politics of Beauty, about Stuart Udall, the former Secretary of the Interior. And I think you were making a movie about David Brower, the environmentalist, who I remember meeting at the Heartland Cafe. And that led to your movie about Stuart Udall. But now you have another film in the works, and I don't think it's done yet, but it sounds great. It's called America the Beautiful, and it's the untold story about Katharine Lee Bates, who wrote the tune. So good morning to you, and I hope you're good. And tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
Sure. Yeah, the film's actually called Loyal to the Truth, Katharine Lee Bates and the Story of America the Beautiful. But that doesn't matter. The Kickstarter campaign's called America the Beautiful because we wanted to draw people's attention. But the film has a slightly different title. And yeah, you're right about all that. One little thing, though, the Wandervogel actually didn't, most of them did not go to Hitler. Most of them didn't. They were repressed and fled the country and did other kinds. But some of them did become Hitler Youth. So unfortunately, that was the case. In any case, they were crushed, and it was a sad thing because they were very much like our own counterculture of the 1960s and 70s. So the new film is about a remarkable woman and the untold story behind the song America the Beautiful, because everybody loves that song, but people love it for different reasons. And most people think it's just a sort of rousing, patriotic, rah-rah America anthem. And it's really anything but. Yes, it's a patriotic song. It celebrates the beauty of the country, but it mostly says America has some really big flaws that we need to correct. And until we correct those flaws, we will never live up to our ideals. It was written in 1893 during the Gilded Age, and it has a strong criticism of the division of wealth between rich and poor. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till selfish gain no longer stains the banner of the free. It's a critique of American imperialism in the Philippines, in the Spanish-American War. America, America, God, mend thine every flaw. And confirm thy soul in self-control. This is about staying one country. So it's really about making our country the best country that it can be. It's not anti-American in any sense. It is in that way patriotic. But it says we are not living up to our ideals. And until we do, we will not match the beauty of the country.
Well, this sounds good. You know, there sounds like there's words in this song I never noticed and never heard before.
Because we don't sing them. We sing the first verse, which is a lovely verse, which is about the beauty of the country. That's the verse we sing. And that's a fine verse, and it does contain the line, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea, which is the message that until we've included everybody in the picture, we're not where we should be. But the more radical lines come later.
I'm going to have to get this whole tune, and they sing it sometimes at baseball games.
Yeah.
You hear it, but this opens up a whole lot of new things.
It does. It's a really interesting song.
It sounds like the issues that Katharine Lee Bates covered in the song are similar to the issues we have today.
In many ways, they are. We're still dealing with the whole issue between rich and poor. In fact, it's even worse maybe now than it was then. We're still certainly dealing with the issues of war and peace. Maybe we're not as out there in a media imperialistic sense as we were in the Philippines, but we're still we're still got a lot of war and troubles in the world, and she was certainly a peacemaker, certainly a supporter of that, a supporter of, for instance, the League of Nations, which our U.S. Senate didn't ratify, so we never joined it, and it didn't happen. So, she believed in peace and brotherhood and social justice, inclusion, very strong supporter of immigrants. So that part, we're still dealing with that today. That was a major issue for her. And protecting the beauty of the country, which I think still is an issue for our environment. Obviously, they didn't know as much about the environment in those days, but they were still into protecting, nature and all the forests that were being cut and things like that.
John de Graaf, how about filling us in a little bit about Katharine Lee Bates? I know she taught at Wellesley. I don't know much more about her. Tell us a little bit about her. Give us the story.
Yeah, she grew up in Falmouth, Massachusetts, and then in Wellesley. So Falmouth is a little town on Cape Cod. Was surrounded by a lot of death because these were all sailors, and they would go out to sea on these long voyages, and many would never come back. And that kind of influenced her. She went to Wellesley College, studied Greek and English, and became a poet, and a well-established poet, and later a professor at Wellesley College during a time of great social turmoil, the Gilded Age. She started being a professor there in 1885, and was surrounded by a wonderful group of other women professors. In fact, at that time, 53 of 55 Wellesley professors were women. The only two guys were because they couldn't find a woman. If they could have, they would have, but they couldn't. And so this community of women was all about women's suffrage. They were all about creating settlement houses on the basis like Jane Addams. They were fighting for the poor. They were fighting for racial justice. They certainly were supporting immigrants and those kind of things. And so it was just a huge progressive community of women at Wellesley at that time, and it made the college a fascinating place. She was also connected with many other important people of the time. Um, Although he died shortly after she met him, the poet Longfellow, who was actually a very progressive guy, again, somebody who's sort of seen as, by the shores of Gitche Gumee thing. But this Longfellow was actually a true abolitionist fighter and progressive fellow. And he told her how much he liked the first poem she had that was published in the Atlantic. And that made her feel she could become a poet too.
We like poets. So what led you to do this film? I mean, how did you find out about Katharine Lee Bates? And why did you decide to make a film about her and the writing of America the Beautiful? And one more time, give me the whole name of the film.
Loyal to the Truth, Katharine Lee Bates and the Story of America the Beautiful.
That's a long title.
It is. It's a long title. It doesn't look as bad on the screen, but it doesn't work with Kickstarter.
How did you end up deciding to do it?
Well, Mike, I'm not a fence sitter, but I do try to bring people together across lines to some degree. The Stuart Udall film is about that too. And I do believe in that we've gotten into a period where we've got two sides that are way on both. One side, the Ron DeSantis side, believes that America never had any flaws and that we should repress our history completely. But unfortunately, on the other side, we have people who believe that America has never done anything right, that everything is just a history of oppressed and oppressor. And that's not true either. And it demeans the great work that so many Americans did over the years to make us more democratic and more inclusive. So those are the stories that I want to tell about people who saw the flaws and wanted to correct them, but did not give up and just say, well, America sucks, So, and that's Katharine Lee Bates. She believed in what she saw as the ideals of the country. Now, of course, even we know that the people who wrote those things didn't fully believe in them, but they were the ideals, brotherhood and justice for all. We don't know it, but even the Pledge of Allegiance, which was written in 1892, the year before America the Beautiful, was written by a Christian socialist minister named Francis Bellamy. And it was written to make sure that we included the immigrants in our idea of America. liberty and justice for all. It was not some kind of right wing thing. It didn't even have undergone in it until 1954 when the McCarthy era put it in. So we have to remember we've got those good things in our history, and we shouldn't let the flag and all those things be simply taken over uh, by the people who don't believe in those ideals.
What
And
gives you
story helps that.
What gives you optimism?
It's hard to be totally optimistic.
No, I'm in agreement with you about.
I'm not a Pollyanna, but it does give me optimism to feel that these kind of stories do touch people. And I hear with the Stuart Udall film now, we've shown that well over 100 times. We've shown it in 24 states and 5 countries. I just recently showed it an invitation, all expenses paid, at the Sorbonne in Paris. So even the French,
Lucky guy.
the French like it. Yeah, so it was kind of cool. And what I find is that people liken it, the idea that, there are some neat things in America's past, and they get excited. And I've even heard from people who were, on the other side of the fence, certainly politically from me, but who say, I like this movie. This movie gives me hope and makes me think we can come together as a nation. So that kind of thing fills me with hope. I think the idea that beauty can bring us together in some ways. Also, I gave a speech on that at the Sorbonne. So that also fills me with hope.
Well, I saw a quote from you that said, the fight for beauty is essential for well-being. And I don't know if that's from your Sorbonne presentation or that's something you said elsewhere, but I really like that saying. And why don't you share a little bit of your thinking on that?
Yeah, that was the title of my speech at the Sorbonne. It was, and I looked at that about how, because it was a conference on how do we measure well-being. It was a European Union conference about, and the Europeans are way ahead of us in trying to find other ways to go beyond GDP and all that stuff and measure well-being. And one of the things that I was arguing is that they need to include some kind of look at beauty as one of the factors in our communities and everywhere else that makes us feel better about life. And the studies show that that's clear, that people who live in what they consider to be beautiful or somewhat beautiful surroundings report on balance 20% higher happiness or well-being than people who believe they live in an ugly or ordinary surroundings. So we see that people who live with a lot of greenery and parks, and Chicago has a great place for parks and all that.
We're the happiest people around.
Yeah, have greenery and parks, and have architecture that's human-sized and not all just these big towering boxes and stuff. That people in those situations are not only feel happier, but when you take their blood, you find that their cortisol levels are lower. There's less stress. And so they are happier. So it's something we can think about, that if we put money, I'm advocating what I call a beauty new deal. And I'm in favor of a Green New Deal too, because I'm a strong environmentalist. But I think a beauty new deal, which would be about hiring lots of people and stuff to restore the balance of nature, to create more parks, more green spaces, to do those kinds of things. I have a whole list of things, and they slip my mind right this minute. But I think a beauty new deal is something that would appeal to Americans across the political spectrum. I have found that conservatives and liberals both love their gardens, and conservatives and liberals both love their national parks. And they may whine about the government, but you find plenty of Republicans at the national parks.
Well, maybe you want to make a movie about Lady Bird Johnson too.
Well, I sort of did. The Udall film has a lot about Lady Bird Johnson in it. Yeah. She was quite remarkable, really.
Yeah, no, she was. I find myself trying to bridge the gap. I mean, I definitely have been on the left side of things for a long time, but I also kind of always rooted for all the people and wanted to have ways you could bring folks together. And I like that you do that too. It's not an easy time to do that.
No.
What is your sense of the population these days? I mean, you're living up in a blue state. I'm sure they have red people up there too, but so to speak. But what what's going on for you? What do you see happening and the points of unity beyond creating beauty, beyond getting this film out? How do you think people should work at this time when we're going into these two conventions uh, diametrically opposed with
Yeah.
threats of demonstrations? You know, I was pictured trying to tip over a paddy wagon back in '68. And there was no way we were for Lyndon Johnson or Hubert Humphrey or any of that kind of stuff
Yeah,
at that time.
I
But
know.
now I feel like an old revisionist trying to talk to younger people about, well, you got to vote for Biden.
Yeah, I agree with that, and
What's your take on
I
that?
really agree with that. I mean, to consider the alternative, and there's no question in my mind that Trump is much worse than Nixon was. You know,
Yeah,
it's not even the same. And Nixon was bad, not, but I mean, this is an order of magnitude more dangerous for the country at this time. And so, you know, you can maybe hold your nose about some of the things Biden has done, although I think he's done a lot of good things too. But I
yeah,
think you want to get out there and support him because I think our country really demands that. And so this film is really, yeah, about that. It's about finding ways to bring us together to support positive. But Katharine Lee Bates, for example, it was interesting. I mean, she was very much a reformer, but she was kind of careful about how she operated. So an interesting story related to that is the Lawrence textile strike of 1912, which was a kind of a fairly violent strike. And there were teachers from her department. She was the head of the English department at Wellesley, who went up to Lawrence and joined the strike. And a woman named Vida Scudder, who was a wonderful radical leader, gave a fiery speech at the Lawrence strike, and then got arrested. And then suddenly, you know, it's kind of like today. The trustees were threatening to cut money from Wellesley as a result. And the trustees told Catherine that basically that she should fire Vida. And Catherine considered that and almost did it because she was so concerned about Wellesley. But she talked to Vida and she said, you know, Vida, I believe in what you're about. I think, you know, what you did risked the college and stuff. So I think you have to be careful. But, you know, if you make a little apology and just say you believe in what you did, but maybe you went a little bit too far, I think the trustees will accept that, and that's what happened. So there was that little compromise that occurred. But I think, you know, Catherine always believed in those kind of things. But she was careful. She didn't want to, and I think that's what we have to be today. We have to believe in our principles, but be careful about how we work so that we don't get something even worse, which is, you know, if you would have gotten Vida fired, and Vida would have been fired by the trustees, and that would have been very bad for the college. And it wasn't a big deal for Vida to make a little bit of an apology and back off a tiny bit and stuff. And so I think that's a good example. I wanted to mention one thing about the film because it's about Chicago. So in 1893, Katharine Lee Bates wrote America the Beautiful. Basically, the first verse is on top of Pikes Peak in Colorado. And she went out there by train to teach summer school in Colorado Springs. And the first place she went to Niagara Falls and saw how beautiful it was, and also how commercialism was kind of starting to overcome it. And then she came to Chicago. And this was the year of the big Columbian Exposition, 1893, which was, so she went to that. It was kind of an amazing thing. All these new things were premiered, including the Ferris wheel and even juicy fruit gum, and, you know, the zipper. All this kind of things came out in Chicago at the fair in 1893. But it was a beautiful place, you know, with all. And so the last verse of her song talks about that, and it says, that America, America, thine alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. Well, that's a direct reference to the Chicago city, the city of marble that was built there. It doesn't mean, it's not about whiteness or race, anything like that at all. It's about the idea that, as she said, every American deserves to live in decent and beautiful surroundings. And now we people are living in these horrible tenements and these terrible places and stuff, and they need to have decent things. Maybe not like quite like Alabama, but they need beautiful cities to live in. And this was connected also with a movement in America at that time called City Beautiful, which believed in the same thing, that American cities needed to be beautified, that we needed lots of parks, all those kind of things. And also, even that was in some ways connected with the American socialist movement, which was about improving these cities, particularly Milwaukee, which became the city of sewer socialists. But they really won because they made a beautiful city, and so I think that's a part of our history that we need to know.
John, this is really, it sounds exciting. I want to know, how far along is the film and when do you expect it to come out?
Sure. Well, we're still in the fundraising process. We have a Kickstarter campaign. If anybody wants to, you can go to Kickstarter and just look for America the Beautiful. It's the quick way to get to it and help us. We have that ends on May 22nd, so we have to get that done by then. But we think we'll make it. And then we've got other fundraising to do, but we've got some real generous donors who I think will step in. And so we're going to start shooting in July. We're going to be shooting first in Colorado. We're going to go up Pikes Peak and things like that. And then we're going to go to Massachusetts and shoot things there, New York City, a few things like that. We'll edit the film. We've also been doing a lot of archival research at Wellesley College and other places. So we have a lot of archival material. And then we will edit the film in the fall. And hopefully, the idea is to premiere the film in early 2025, maybe even July 4th or Memorial Day or something like that. 2025 is also the 150th anniversary of Wellesley College, which is interesting. And we are in conversations. I can't say much about them because we don't have anything finalized yet, but we are in conversations with the Boston Pops about doing part of the music for the film and making some kind of collaboration between the film and the Boston Pops, which would be wonderful, but I don't want to jump the gun. Yeah.
Well, I tell you, please keep me posted where you're going to be shooting, because, in my old age, I want to still take some more road trips, and maybe I'll link up and find out where you're filming and hang around with you a little bit.
Sure, that'd be great.
It would be fun. One of the things that I understand you've said is that this may be your last film. So how about telling us a little bit about any films you've made that I don't know about? And maybe a little bit, we got a couple minutes, where you come from, how you got into the film work.
Well, the first film I made was about the time I first met you, and it was about an old radical congressman in northern Minnesota from the Farmer Labor Party named John Bernard. This was in 1977. This year is the 100th anniversary of the Minnesota Farmer Labor Party. So believe it or not, I have been invited back to Hibbing, Minnesota, to the Iron Range on June 22nd to show my very first film to a big event celebrating the Farmer Labor Party. And the next day, I go down to Minneapolis to the public library there for an event to show my film Labor's Turning Point about the 1934 Minnesota Teamster strike. It is the 90th anniversary of that particular event. So I haven't seen these films for 20 years or more. But anyway, it's my first and third film that I ever did. I've done almost 50. So it's kind of exciting to know that this kind of comes back and that these kinds of films are still useful to people after so long. Most of my films have been environmental, have been social justice, have been things like that. And I don't know, I said Udall would probably be my last film too, and I'm saying it about this one. I do feel a little tired with the travel now. So I may devote more time to just a lot of writing, which I'm doing too.
You're a good writer.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, where did you grow up? Just so I know, get a little info on you. Minnesota?
San Francisco. No, I came to Minnesota. I was a freshman at Cal Berkeley in 1964, the year of the free speech movement.
I was a graduate student at my first year at Berkeley when I got busted in 64.
Yeah, so we were there at the same time, but I was pretty ignorant of all that stuff. I did join the demonstration, but I had no idea what the issues were, and I did not get arrested. But then I left school, and I joined VISTA, the Domestic Peace Corps, the first year of its existence. And they sent me to an Indian reservation in northern Wisconsin called Bad River. And I spent 2 years there and then went back to school in Wisconsin and spent 14 years in the Midwest.
Well, John de Graaf, it's really great talking to you. And I look forward to doing it again for however many films you continue to make. We'll keep having you on the show. And I really would love to link up with you when you're out in the field shooting, maybe Pikes Peak.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, give us one more time the title of the film and how people can read about you or the film.
Well, the title is Loyal to the Truth, the Katharine Lee Bates and the Story of America the Beautiful. And people can go to the Kickstarter campaign, America the Beautiful, and they can watch a trailer, 4 minutes of the film to get a sense of who she was. And thank you, Mike. It's always great to catch up with you. You're doing great. You know,